Welcome back to the City Ramble. Jay, let's get into it then.
Yep.
Brighton at the weekend. I think looking down the table, Liverpool, Chelsea, United, maybe Spurs away. And I mean, I'm near enough reading 1 to 5. But my point is, if you're picking a game you don't want to be going into, having just lost 3 on the bounce, Brighton away in their current form, it's not a nice one, is it?
No. It's to be fair. I always say when I'm building up to any Premier League, in particular away from home, the games are always going to be so difficult, and they offer lots of different challenges, and there's lots of different styles that you're having to cope with. And going away to Brighton is going to require Manchester City to pull out, to me, a 10 out of 10 performance. If we want to come away from the Amex with 3 points, it's got to be a 10 out of 10 performance. Anything down from a 10, and Brighton, I think, are going to be all over that. They've got a lot of quality, they've got a good manager, play a really good system, and I think most importantly, they play Manchester City's weakness, which is they've got quick players who can hurt Manchester City on the counter-attack. So if these problems in midfield, where there's a lack of runners, in my opinion, there's a lack of energy and pace in midfield, Brighton will be all over it. If Man City continue to push with slow defenders who are going with a high line, the likes of Danny Welbeck and Matoma, they're going to be all over it. So Manchester City have just got to really tighten things up, keep the game nice and close, got to be patient, and most importantly, if we're being put under pressure, ensuring that we're not just running back like headless chicken, a defensive line that's just all over the place. And because Brighton, they've got too much quality and they will score goals and they'll punish Manchester City for it. So with the run of form that we've got, it's just not an ideal game.
It's not an ideal game. It's not an ideal game at all, Adam. And I think people were maybe a little bit blindsided by Brighton last year. They had, under Potter and then subsequently Roberto De Zerbi, they had a really strong couple of years. They get into Europe, but that European endeavour, as pretty much every team's found out that plays in Europe, it does take its toll on a squad, and you do get more injuries. And they finished 11th last year. I think they're 8th this time around. But looking at the expected points table, they're on. They're either on 15 points and have had an expected points return of 16, or the opposite way around. They're on 16 and have had an expected points return of 15. They are very much performing within their means, and they deserve to be in the top half of the table, back in European contention. Danny Welbeck has been a revelation, but Jay's right. They are, in some ways, City's kryptonite in terms of a setup. So I think it's a case of you sat in the dressing room, you Guardiola, you're saying, give me 90 minutes before the international break, and I'm going to make a decision over this time going into the winter. Who are my Warriors? Who are going to play the big matches? Because this is another one of those games where I'm looking at it thinking, there could be some questions asked about not mentality, not behind the scenes, etc. Just the playing ability of the players that City have at the disposal. Should it go awry?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a game that's similar to Sporting in the way that they set up and the way that they play, and that obviously City are going to have most of the ball, and they do in almost every game they play. But an informed striker, like you said, in Danny Welbeck, which is a crazy thing to say in 2024, but an informed Danny Welbeck and a team that can hit on the break really well. That you're right. That's absolutely the recipe to get at City, is to be brave when you have the ball, and that's exactly what Brighton have been this season, and they were obviously under De Zerbi. So there's every chance in the world that it's another stinker that, like we've seen in the last 8 to 10 days. But there's also every chance in the world that City go there, they control the game, and they win it 2-0. That's where we're at with City at the moment, is the quality, the experience, the mentality is obviously there and could be flipped on at any moment with City. So you have to go into the game thinking that it's a game that you can definitely get a result in. But I think the first 15, 20 minutes, if Brighton have a few big chances and City have a few big chances and don't take them, like we've seen in the past few weeks, then I think the worry will start to creep in a little bit. Absolutely.
Yeah. Agreed, totally. Jay, just in terms of, and it's an increasingly redundant question given City's injury problems at the moment, but in terms of who might actually pull the shirt on, I think we're probably looking at a copy and paste job from Sporting, bar maybe one or two changes. Obviously, Kyle Walker was on the bench, but his performance against Bournemouth left a lot to be desired, and the noise feels like he's not fit still. You've got Nathan Ake who came back. I think if you bring in Nathan Ake for Simpson Puzzi, that makes sense. Otherwise, I don't know where the changes might come from. Doku, perhaps, is he fully fit? This is where we're at.
It's an interesting one. If it was me and I was in charge, I'd start Kyle Walker, and I'd tell Kyle Walker he's got one job on that pitch. He's got to man mark Matoma out of that game. Think of it like when we've played against PSG in previous seasons, and he goes up against Kylian Mbappe. I feel like Kyle Walker's at his very defensive best when he's got nothing to do other than ensure that quick winger isn't getting past me. And if you tell Kyle Walker that's his job for this game, you keep one of their attacking threats very quiet, and you can then start to have the likes of your Kovacic's, Ake if he starts, your Akanji's to say, your job's to deal with the threat of Danny Welbeck. And I think if City can just keep Matoma and Danny Welbeck quiet in this game, gives us a really good outlet into this game, and it also allows us to control the game as well, because that's the Sporting game. The big problem for me was that 5 minutes after the start of the second half, City were out of control. They got shell-shocked from a goal after 20 seconds from the restart. They didn't know how to respond, and they hit panic stations, and they were doing things that, quite frankly, they wouldn't do if the game was still sitting at 1-0. They were panicking. So it's all about control with Manchester City, controlling the phases of the game, ensuring that if Brighton want to come and have a pop at us in the first 10, 15 minutes, you've got to keep them out. You've got to hold that clean sheet, because I've seen too many times this season the likes of Ipswich, Brentford, Bournemouth, teams scoring first against us. And if you're scoring first against us, we're immediately under pressure that we've got to not only score one goal, we've got to score two to be able to win the game. And you're under just
and when the goals aren't coming at the moment, like they're not, exactly. That's the big issue.
Yeah,
it's a big issue.
So to me, you've got to go back to when you're looking at football. If you're not going to be scoring too many goals, you've got to ensure that you're not conceding. Because if City can sneak a 1-0 win, it's a brilliant result to take us into the international break. Not only does it give us all a good pick-me-up, it sends us top of the Premier League going into Liverpool's game at Anfield against Aston Villa, which then becomes for them quite tricky. We're only early into the season, so to me it sounds quite crazy to be suggesting that games are so important right now, but I just feel like pressure can be a funny thing, and Liverpool's got a difficult game, we've got a difficult game, we're going first, win our game and see where we go from there.
It's an interesting dynamic. Obviously we don't usually get a Saturday 8 o'clock kickoff. So it could be, City lose, City win. It does have permutations even this early on in the season. I totally agree, Jay. But Adam, to bring you in on this, I just wondered, to wrap up, I wonder if the pursuit of control with Rodri's absence causes City, in a weird roundabout way, to lose control, because they don't have... When they were trying to do it with Haaland when he first arrived, they had Rodri, who could do the job of two midfielders, and he could cover the ground, and he could create chances, and he would pop up with goals. We don't need to say it again, but Mateo Kovacic... Well, I'm going to say it again, but Mateo Kovacic obviously isn't Rodri. And I wonder, not that this will ever be the case, in fact, I imagine it's going to go the opposite way, but I wonder if City would have more joy trying to be a little bit more chaotic. And it sounds like we're having the same conversations from autumn 2022, winter 2022, when Haaland just comes into the team. But having watched the Sporting game, having watched some of those goals back, it was just remarkable how easy City were ran through. And I don't think it's necessarily a problem you can fix overnight, because the players just aren't there to cover whatever gaps were being left.
I think it's an interesting suggestion, but I wholeheartedly disagree to just lean into the chaos. I'm thinking of it like a wound. City are constantly bleeding at the moment. If I were a doctor, I'm not. I'm a freelance football journalist, far from a doctor. If I were a doctor, my suggestion would not be spread the wound open a little bit more and hopefully all of the blood drains out. It would be to
But are they
find
near a
better
hospital?
band-aids.
To use your metaphor, are they near a hospital, or do they need to start running a
See,
little bit quicker
I
to
live in
get to the
America. The
hospital?
question would be, can I afford that hospital? Not, am I near the hospispital?
Well, City have the net spend.
That's true.
They can buy it. They can buy an
Yeah,
ambulance.
Joe Butters knows about net spend.
Oh yeah.
But I think when you bring up Holland's first season, yes, Rodri was there, and I think you could say he's doing the job of multiple midfielders, and especially the Rodri heading into this past summer for Spain was probably doing the job of three midfielders because he was also scoring and creating. And I think the difference in that first Holland season was the fact that City also found defensive solidity through playing four center backs, and obviously John Stones would step into midfield. At the moment, you don't have four center backs even at your disposal. Manuel Akanji is one of the three fit ones, and he doesn't even seem fully fit. I mean, I don't know if it was just fatigue or if he's not
He
fully
didn't
fit,
look
but
great. Didn't look
against
great.
Sporting, when Gyökeres would get played in behind or whoever it was that would kind of bomb forward for Sporting, he couldn't keep up, and that's not Manuel Akanji. I mean, one of his absolute strengths, we saw it in the treble run, was he was playing out at right back against Leroy Sané, Serge Gnabry, Alphonso Davies, and Real Madrid wingers, and that is his strength. Is he can run with some of the quickest forwards in football. I think at the current moment, as much as I hate to say this, I think actually probably the thing to do is to go big and quick in defense, and that would be basically all of your fit defenders: Kyle Walker, Manuel Akanji, Nathan Ake, and Josko Gvardiol. And I think I'd stick Rico Lewis into midfield.
Okay.
I think that he gives you not only legs, and obviously not the kind of legs that Rodri is, and that he can cover loads of ground very quickly, but he gives you energy. He also gives you the control we've seen when he stepped into midfield from right back this season. I think if Pep and City are going to find the balance between defensive solidity, a bit of control, and also having the dynamism going forward, I think that Rico Lewis has to come into midfield and you have to go big and quick at the back. And Kyle Walker is that. He's obviously lost a step mentally and physically this season. I think you have to, given the injury crisis, at least for now until the end of November when you start to get John Stones and Ruben Diaz back, I think you have to lean on Kyle Walker, at least in this game, to give you 90 minutes of the Kyle Walker that we have known and at times loved throughout his City career. Other than that, if it's JSP back in the back line and Rico Lewis again, I think there's every chance they get absolutely ripped through by Brighton. So I think and if that's the case, I don't think leaning into the chaos is the way to go, particularly because City's chaos players, your Doku's and Foden to an extent, and Haaland, haven't been taking their chances this season. Haaland has, of course. He's banging in goals left and right. But Doku's not scoring. Savio's not scoring. Phil Foden's not scoring yet. So you can't go out there and expect it to be 4-4 against Chelsea last season or the 3-3 against Spurs, because City aren't taking their chances at the moment. So I think they have to revert back and they have to learn to stink out games instead of trying to go score 3 and 4 and just outmatch a team that is hot in front of goal.
Yeah, I do agree. For what it's worth, I do agree. I just wonder with Kovacic there at the base of midfield, and if it's not Kovacic, it's Gundogan. They're just not very. It's difficult to control matches when your holding midfielder struggles to run around the middle of the park. And look, that's not on them at all. Again, it's another question maybe in the run up to January. But speaking of strong debuts from JSGC, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. It's been great to have you on. I'm sure it won't be the first time.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me on. Much appreciated, guys.
Adam, another match day. Deep breath. It could be nice. A 2-0, a nice 2-0, and that would set up the weekend, wouldn't it?
Yeah, listen, I also have been very vocal on this podcast about the fact that City have won 4 Premier League titles in a row. So a couple of weeks of bad results is not the worst thing to happen to anybody, is it?
Absolutely.
especially if you're bleeding out on the street and there's a hospital near you that you can't afford, you know?
Well, my medical advice would be just run faster. So there you go, City. Just run faster. That was the first part of the show. If you want more, make sure to check the City Ramble wherever you get your podcast from.